New Zealand appears to be facing another wave of COVID infection leading into Christmas, and employers need to know what their obligations are in terms of employee wellbeing in this ever-changing situation. I'm joined by Darren Gunasekara, a senior solicitor in employment with Simpson Grierson, to get the lowdown on what employers need to know. Darren, thanks for coming by. What kind of problems are employers running into as COVID picks up again? We thought we'd sort of got past this, but now it's rearing its ugly head again. So what do employers need to think about?
Yeah, that's right. I think with this sort of wave picking back up and things like that, and also I think against the backdrop of getting towards the end of the year, people are tired, people are, a lot of people are fatigued, and people, do get sick quite often towards the end of the year. Mm-hmm. So I think employers in particular need to be thinking about really ensuring the well-being of their staff. So, and that's obviously both physical and mental. So, and I think it's also timely given the government's announcement that it will be implementing the sick leave changes in the Holidays Act Task Force's the Holidays Act Task Force report. I think employers should be thinking about how to really make the most of employees' sick leave entitlements to make sure that they're well and rested and can work healthily.
So, what's the detail of those changes then? What do people need to know?
Yeah, so they the report sort of sets out a number of changes, but I'll just focus on the sick leave ones at the moment. So, at the moment, employees get 10 days of leave, and they don't get any of that entitlement until 6 months has passed, and they've worked for a certain period of hours during that period. With the changes, some of that entitlement is going to arise immediately. So that's based around, employees can't control when they're sick.
No.
So with the change, employees will be entitled to some of that immediately, one day of sick leave as right from the outset, and then they'll build up an extra day on each month until they hit 5 days of entitlement, and then it'll continue to build. So there will be more sick leave, basically. The employees will be entitled to sick leave earlier, and they can take it if they so wish immediately.
Seems like a fairly sensible change.
That's right, yeah.
It's been a long year for many, and you've already touched on mental well-being being a big factor. How do employers, or how much do they have to factor that in for their staff as the year draws to a close?
They should a lot. They should be. They should really. It should be forefront of mind, and they. I don't think it makes a difference whether it's the start or the end of the year. It's something that employers and managers should always be mindful of. Particularly, I think, with summer approaching, and also just the fact that, with a lot of remote working and things, people might be at home and they might be still logging on and working, but they might not be well. So I think employers, managers should be thinking about that, and if there are any signs that somebody might not be well, really jumping on top of that and doing their due diligence and making sure that people are well.
Do you think employers broadly have got a lot better at that?
Yes and no. I think in general, that employers are aware that sickness goes around, both mental and physical, but no, because just this whole remote working, and so you might be a little bit sniffly or whatever, and the employee might say, "Oh, look, I'm okay to keep working," and there certainly are situations where they're not well enough. So employers, yes, they're getting better, but with remote working, I think they just need to be extra careful.
In that situation of people working from home, feeling sick but thinking, well, I'm at home anyway, I'm not isolating, I might as well just keep working, it seems to be a fairly strong trend, I would say. How, as an employer, can you tell, or how do you sort of mitigate that as an employer? Because you can't really tell when someone's away from the office, can you?
Well, that's right. I think, the first thing I think is just leading by example. Right. Managers and things, if everybody at some point is too sick to work. So if managers are sort of leading by example by themselves, taking some time to rest and recover when they're not well, it gives employees that, confidence to do it themselves, because it is their right to. But also, there are going to be situations where employees can work. You might, if for example they're very clear that I'm feeling fine, but I just might be a little bit germy or something like that. Yeah. So it's just about asking those questions and being leading by example and asking the questions about employees. How they're doing, and it's a case by case thing. Like some employees might naturally be a bit more reserved about wanting to tell you those things, but I think employers can always, if you get a little bit of a sense that something might not be right, because your employees, you can then ask those questions and really make it clear that there is no expectation, that they are entitled to sick leave if they genuinely are sick.
Are there any risks for employers in this sort of situation where, people are still working when maybe they shouldn't, they're not taking that sick leave? What sort of risk or problems does that potentially present to employers further down the track?
Yeah, well, there's actually, you risk breaching several pieces of legislation, really. It's a health and safety issue. So the primary risk is that, you're not, as an employer, you're not meeting your primary duty of care, which is to ensure the health and safety of staff. Because if somebody's, working while they're sick and they deteriorate, or, they're just, anything happens, or, that there's a risk of a breach of the Health and Safety at Work Act. But there's also other pieces of legislation, like acts that, such as the Employment Relations Act, the Human Rights Act, even the Protected Disclosures Act, any sort of act by an employer that could be seen to be going against health and safety. Employers could risk personal grievances or claims around those pieces of legislation.
Darren, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Hamish. Thanks for having me.